ready to be disappointed? Oh, get ready. My name, as you've heard, is Michael Howard. I basically could not be here if it were not for my muse and my inspiration on this earth. And also the co-developer of all the work you're going to hear about tonight. That's my lovely wife, Amelia. Stand up. I'm going to tell you a little story about Eden Place Nature Center. I'm going to talk really fast because I only got a few minutes. And try to get through this real fast for you. Got a lot of pictures. You know, I don't have very many words in my vocabulary, so I can't impress you with those. Let's try pictures. I'm talking about an ecological and cultural restoration of an urban land ethic. Sounds good, doesn't it? I got that from my friends up in Baraboo. Yeah, at the Aldo Leopold Foundation. They're good people. I have a target audience. That target audience look like these people up here. Good looking family, right? Yep. I'm gonna tell you, these people are more than you can handle, I tell you. Mainly because my goal is to reconnect people to the land. There is such a disconnect. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. My goal, my goal is to reconnect my people back to the land. And there is such a disconnect. I have so many obstacles that my wife and I have had to overcome. And so we're going to share some of those with you. There's a cultural disconnect. Our culture being people of African descent going through what they went through, coming from the South into Chicagoland area. There is a serious cultural disconnect from land. We had to overcome a lot of scars from that past. We had to overcome the loss of our history. Wow. A lot of our history was carried down to us through stories. There were not books, there were not encyclopedias, there was no big study that was published in papers for most of my ancestors' history here in America. And so therefore, we had to overcome a lot of those obstacles in reconnecting people back to the land, because most of the people we reached out to some 25 years ago when we started our organization, the last thing they wanted to hear about was some stuff dealing with the environment and ecology. I was at a community meeting much like this with a bunch of people like, well, not like you, but they numbered like you. And I started doing my little speech about ecology and the environment and wetlands and prairies. And somebody in the back of the room stood up and said, "Man, we don't hear nothing about no ecology. That's white people stuff." I say, no, it's a human being thing. Because we have to drink the same water, eat the same food, and breathe the same air. And unless you get engaged, you're being affected every day in your family by people outside of this community, and you don't even know what battle that is fighting against you and yours. And so we moved on to talk about the cultural disconnect first. The Great Migration. Hands, anybody ever heard of the Great Migration? Yes, well, that's when a lot of black folks from the South decided it was time to go. And they boarded trains and buses and left the South in droves. So between 1910 and 1960s, we had a mass migration from the South to the North in search of good jobs and better lives. Anybody recognize the artist in these pictures? Well, this is from a very famous series by an artist, black artist named Jacob Lawrence. And basically, it depicts a lot of the different cities and struggles that people came from and went through to get to the north. Even though the promise to the north brought some good to the millions of family members who migrated, the downside of the Great Migration was this. African Americans turned away from the land. I'm going to say that again. African Americans turned away from the land. Why? When we talked to the elders, they told us about their scars. Much of American history remains unrecorded, basically residing in the stories and memories of the people that made the migration. I actually remember my great-grandmother's sharecropper shack. It looked just like this. When people think about the South, this is one of the first images come to their mind. Picking cotton, which is really very far from the truth. It was a lot more agriculture going on in the South, other than just picking cotton. There were some other scars that my seniors and my elders told me. They talked about the Jim Crow laws, separate but equal, and the economic strife of, like my grandmother would tell me, boy, you ain't gonna never you're not gonna never be finished paying the stove. I was trying to use her verbiage. It's a little hard being bilingual. And it took me a while to understand as a 10-year-old boy what she meant. That you will never not owe the store. I didn't understand how basically she worked on credit. She picked cotton during the day, and when she needed flour and butter and fat back, she went to the store. She didn't have to pay cash, they just put it on the ledger. And at the end of the season, when the crop was in, all the cotton picked and all the seeds separated, you go to the cotton mill and they had your ledger. And then they say, well, you almost paid up. Better luck next year. Now don't forget to come pick up your seed, and that'll be on your ledger. They charge the people, in a lot of cases, for the seed that the owner planted. We didn't know any better. So those are kind of scars. But you should hear my uncle's scars. They were running from these guys. Too many uppity, I'm not going to say the N-word because you may be offended. But a lot of my uncles left the South because these guys were coming that night. A lot of the senior elders talked about some hard stories I won't even mention. But it's a good motivator to get you to move, I tell you that. Another thing that happened was the lost history. We lost our history of farming that goes all the way back to Africa. We've been farming a long time, y'all. But in modern times, something's changed. We were even specialty crop farmers. You see the age on this picture? This is an old picture. Specialty crop farming now, they talk about it like it's something new, something special. African Americans have been doing it a long time. Farming distribution centers. We've been doing it a long time, moving crops all over this country. How many of you know there were black wheat farmers? Got a picture right here, prove it. How about rice farmers? Got a picture to prove it. My wife is from Louisiana. They still got rice paddies down there, y'all. Potato farmers, come on now. Look at them furrows. He did that with a team of mules, y'all. Come on. Not only could we grow some hogs, we knew how to cook them too. And I done slopped a mini hog in my life that ended up at our family reunion table. So I have no problem understanding where food comes from. Farmers markets in our day, they may have been a little brutal, but they worked. We came in from the fields, we plopped it down on the ground, and we stood around chewing the fat till somebody came and bought it. Farmers markets are not new. I want to introduce y'all to the real American farmer. Come on, tell the truth. When you think about the American farmer, you don't see him, do you? No, you don't. But he's been farming this country, feeding your ancestors for a long time. So reconnecting to the land is something we had to come up with new paradigms to make it happen. We had to reshape the perception of the rural and the urban so that people could make a connection. And how did we do that? Well, we started a little place called Eden Place Nature Center. We bought a little old Farmall tractor, 51, Farmall H. And we take people on hay rides down the street, State Street of Chicago. You should see the stairs and all the traffic stopping to see that. Another way we use a reconnection method is by working with our elders, learning from them, and showing them how they can grow food in a safe manner in an urban environment, because the soil in an urban environment is very, very toxic. And so they knew how to grow food. We just had to share with them the dangers of the food that they were growing. And it's amazing what Mr. Brown here, you should see his corn. He grows corn in about 2 inches of crap. I mean, the stands look good, but I had to sort of say it softly about all the toxins and the heavy metals that corn and all his other succulent plants were pulling up out of that soil. We also started a school, Eden Place Farm School. Do you know how strange people look at me when I say I have a farm school in Chicago? They're like, there's no farms in Chicago. I say, yes, there are. It's a different paradigm. We have another method by working with the young. And you can see this young man here actually growing some seedlings from seed. This young lady growing seedlings from seeds. This whole classroom learning how to run a greenhouse. You have to start when they're young so they can get that appreciation for the food they eat and working with the land and the soil, showing the bounty. Here's one of the bounties. One of our urban farmers is bragging about his potatoes. Now, I must say, those potatoes did taste good. I was like, man, that's some buttery potatoes. So how do we do it as an urban farm? We start off by putting down some landscape fabric, because we have to truck in the cleanest soil we can find from decommissioned farms into the city, which is our biggest cost. Just to remediate one city lot, what you're looking there at the top left-hand corner, that's one city lot. It's about $8,000 to basically get it into the growing state. But you can see we also have double lots that are covered by high tunnels. They grow pretty good food. And this food is the only local food in the community, because our community does not have a grocery store. There's no grocery store. It doesn't have a library either. So we make up for a lot of the lack with our organization. We make farming fun for the new farmers that we train, because basically we have to break that ideology that working on a farm is slave labor. That's a hard one to break, because usually that's the first thing out of people's mouths when we talk about growing food in the city. So we have a lot of people that have had a change of mind. We started farmers markets so people could weekly come to the market, buy fresh fruit and produce that we grow. We train people to be leaders. Mr. Benoit, you saw him with his potatoes. Well, he now is one of our farm supervisors who basically got a good green thumb. We also share ideologies with people from around the country. We actually have every summer for 3 months upwards to 400 people that travel as far away as Washington State to come spend a week of in-service learning with us, learning our best practices for transforming land into something that's fruitful. This is our nature center, which was one time something that was beyond our control. It was an illegal dump site, 35 years. But we transformed it into some green space where we now train people, we have fun, we have the only pumpkin patch festival in the city. People get to come out and see Mr. Howard on his tractor, tilling up the soil. We're kind of getting away from the tiller, going to the no-till method, but with what we had started with a real tiller. No-till wasn't going to get us where we had to go first, but we're building up to that. And then we cut our furrows pretty much by hand because we're trying to provide labor jobs. If we did everything 100% with mechanics, we couldn't hire as many people as we try to hire. And so the farmer's market gets to show off things that people didn't even know you could grow, like cantaloupe, okay? A lot of people don't know you can grow watermelons in Chicago. You just gotta have the right weather. You gotta start early and get things in the ground. We have school groups that come from public schools from all over the city to come out and learn about nature from our instructors. And they come out to the tune of about 10,000 people a year. And you can see them just doing what we call fun. Now they've got new titles for it: outdoor exploration, open space play. And I just love how people just like to retitle stuff that, you know, we do naturally. But they retitle it, no offense, they write a book, and then they try to sell it to me. It's like I wrote the whole goddamn book. You talked to me about that 10 years ago. But anyway, we do a lot of service learning with urban kids, trying to reconnect them to the land, to understand that they have to become stewards, okay? Because they're the ones that are going to be inheriting what we're leaving behind. I mean, from the hoop houses to the open fields, to the field trips that we take the children on, from the community events that we do farm to table, so folks can taste food straight out of the hoop house, you know, and just go, man, these are some good greens. Or these are some good potatoes. But the one that gets them the most are these. They say, wow, those are some good eggs. And we're proud of those eggs because this is the Cadillac chicken coop right there. Okay? 30 of them in there. Putting out pretty good. Here's something we can't grow enough of: green tomatoes. The seniors just love them. And then we have just all kinds of workshops and field trips that the children come out to. Here's my wife playing in her collard greens, making sure there's no bugs on them. You should have saw her with her little bitty bucket and her tools that she takes out into the farm yards to make sure her greens come out okay. This is Henrietta. This is the one that I actually pulled a red-tailed hawk off of, and she survived. So she gets to be an educational bird many, many, many days. We love to have weenie roast and s'mores night on Eden Place. People just love it, like this young man here who's never done it, and he's choking off the smoke. But he kept coming back for more. So what we learned is that urban farming helps us to reconnect all to terra. And Eden Place has been doing that job for almost 18 years now, teaching people how to restore their land. But I'd like to leave you with this last thought. It's a question. I'm not going to try to answer it. It's just a question. Some nights when I'm at home struggling, the question comes up: how do you attain justice when your stories, your science, and your voice are habitual victims of genocide? And if you want to know what I'm talking about, feel free to talk to me afterwards. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it again from Michael. That was powerfully complementary stories tonight. A deeply urban story with roots in rural history, moving to a rural Colorado story. And a very good friend of the Headwaters Conference, one of the Headwaters elders, Dr. Devon Pena. I believe he said he was at the first ever Headwaters, and he played basketball with Art Goodtimes. And I can't unsee that image for those of you who know Art Goodtimes. Go to the one, you'll laugh. And so it's wonderful to have you here, Devon. And I'll just read your bio from the Wilderness book. Devon Pena is a professor of American Ethnic Studies, Anthropology, and Environmental Studies at the University of Washington. He is also the founder and president of the Acequia Institute here in Colorado, a charitable foundation that supports the environmental and food justice movement and operates a 181-acre farm in Colorado. He's the author of numerous peer-reviewed articles, many award-winning books, 3 edited volumes, senior editor of 2 Oxford encyclopedias. He's co-editor of the forthcoming book, which is now out. Just out. He was walking around with it last night, Mexican Food Origins, Foodways, and Social Movements, a decolonial reader. To be published, it's already published. He's also completing work on his next monograph, his life's work, The Last Common. Let's welcome our good friend Devon Pena.
I'm going to start with this. It's not Star Sucks. It's manzanilla, chamomile. And speaking of medicine and our grandmothers, our abuelitas, and what they knew, there's medicine right here tonight, and it's for nervous stomach. And with Robin and you and all of these other folks in the audience, I'm a little nervous. So it's a real honor to be here. Mocto, gracias. Thank you so much for having me here. I also want to start with my grandmother. And before her, my great-grandmother, I said Mocto, it means thank you in Muskogee. My great-grandmother was Missouri Ann Berryhill of the Raccoon clan. And Michael Berryhill, I'm part of the Berryhill family, is teaching me my language. I know very few words, and it's painful, and yet wonderful at the same time. I can't quite explain how you feel when you're learning an ancestor, a good ancestor's language. I also have very bad ancestors in my heritage, colonial ancestors. And I also have diaspora Sephardic Jewish ancestors in my family. So it's like this incredible hybridity that I've experienced that brings together many worlds. But in many ways, I really need to start, if I can figure this out, with my grandmother, my paternal grandmother. Everything I do, I owe her. I was raised by her, I was orphaned at about 9 months, brought to Laredo, and raised by my paternal grandmother, Margarita Kinder Pena. And Margarita taught me my love of gardening because we had a little rancheria, about 1 acre, next to a junkyard, and next to a natural gas transfer station and a cotton gin 2 blocks away where obviously the works on the tracks. And that natural gas transfer station would blow up, the valve would just lose control, wake us up in the middle of the night. It was like that, you know, jumping out of bed. Talking about variable racism, I know how that feels. It's not a theory for me, it's a theory in the flesh. It's really what it is. But at the same time, in the midst of all that pain and horror and danger, there was this beautiful garden. You can see some of the flowers. I wish I had a color version of this. The rose bush that my grandmother did. She had a cactus fence. I think they call it permaculture. Come on. And we've been doing it for thousands of years, certainly well before Mollinson or any of those other folks thought of the word permaculture. I'm very thankful to Margarita for teaching me about this ancient knowledge of making an edible landscape, a fence that you could eat from, and your neighbors could eat from too. So it was like a commons, and the barn fence was a commons. It wasn't meant to divide, but to bring together. And so I'm really grateful to her for that. And above all, I'm grateful because she was a seed saver. And I've been doing this for my second time in my life for 35 years now. I've been saving seed, the Three Sisters mostly, but a few other things like naturalized fava beans, we call them havas, or horse beans in San Luis, Colorado. And she kept them in a cupboard next to the stovetop, either in coffee cans or in mason jars that were lucky. Didn't always have mason jars. They're too expensive. That's why a lot of people didn't do canning in those days in Laredo, Texas, where I grew up. And so instead, she kept them in the cupboard. She planted them every year. Corn bean squash, cilantro, and also she planted like yerba de las nubes, marigold, Mexican marigold. It attracts beneficial insects. It helps create good soil biodynamics. So I asked her, why do you save the seeds? In Spanish, she spoke German and Spanish. She didn't really speak English. And so I asked her, why? Porque ponen las semillas ahí, mamá. And that's what she answered. She said, porque la semilla es la memoria de la planta como vivir bien en este lugar. And she nailed it. Right? I mean, that's science. See, the question, stories, science, justice, is that we have to understand that one of the paths to justice is answering the question, whose science? Whose science are we talking about? You were talking about indigenous science. You're talking about indigenous science. I'm talking about indigenous science. And we have to be aware of that. Because Westerners aren't the only people with science. Now we need to build a bridge between those sciences. We need to nurture each other's knowledge. We need to collaborate. And it's not just interdisciplinary. It's a multicultural, transcultural is a better word, kind of a transcultural interdisciplinary collaboration is what we need. If we're going to work together to save this planet. And for me, by the way, when I talk about interdisciplinary, we need to understand capitalism, the other C word, climate change, climate chaos, capitalism. I've said this many times here. How many of you know a definition of capitalism that's not propaganda, meaning free markets, right? That's a propaganda definition. We don't understand capitalism. We don't understand the second contradiction of capitalism, its tendency, because it must always expand on a finite world, destroying the very conditions of its own existence and therefore endangering us. So when I think about the need for transcultural, interdisciplinary knowledge production, we need to learn about capitalism. Can it be made sustainable? I really do agree with Native studies scholars like Lynn Coulthard who say you can't indigenize capitalism. There's no way to indigenize capitalism. So what does that mean? That we're going to be communists and socialists? No. Those are also Western systems. And I think the distinction we need to learn to make and invent a whole new kind of economy that has existed before but we have forgotten is the one you were showing us glimpses of. The reason there were farmers markets back then is there was a solidarity economy instead of a predatory economy. You were building a solidarity economy. You come from a community that has a long history of solidarity. All of us do, actually. We've forgotten that. Not only have people of color and Native people lost history, all of you have lost your history. Think about that. That's why people want to do permaculture and soil biodynamics in Euro-American culture, of course. It's important. Do it. But don't forget who the source is. It's not just Europe. Hugel culture, we got that. We do rotten wood mounds. Been doing them for thousands of years. So it's not just a German invention. It is, but not just. See, all those wonderful chances to connect these stories. So I really am thankful to my grandma for teaching me this. How was I doing that? Was I doing that? Now, let me focus on corn stories. Teocintles, Ciantil, y también maíz, the Latin botanical classification Zea maíz. Some people say the scientific name. Wait a minute. Teocintles, sorry, I keep forgetting. Teocintles is the scientific name. It's the indigenous scientific name. Zea maíz is like a Latin nomenclature for botanical. Kind of a weird one too. They come up with all kinds of bad names. Phacelia vulgaris. You know, we've got hundreds of varieties of beans, and they call them all the vulgar bean. Phaseolus vulgaris, come on. So ignore the Latin names. Learn the indigenous names. There's pronouns about those names. Well, this is, a lot of ways, when I want to connect the dots is by talking about storied residence in place. The Aseki Institute that we established in 2006, those 181 acres in Viejo San Acacio, we really do work hard with protecting the Three Sisters. And we do that across generations. We do that with community-based groups, with students. Some of you have come out in your classes with John and Lynn Sickink and others. And of course, we do an agricultural mentoring program with our youth to inform them and teach them and feed them our heritage cuisine and connect those dots in much the same way that we're all trying to do, I think, both in urban and rural settings. Because you would think that people who can grow food, I wonder if you could lower the lights a little bit, because there's something that's not really coming out on that slide, but I'd like it to be more visible. We're producing food in San Luis, but our youth aren't eating it sometimes. A lot of our youth would rather drive 45 miles to Alamosa, Colorado, instead of eating chicos del horno, or verdolagas, or anything like that. I call this my rainbow corn. You see that rainbow? This is a Zuni red flint that I've had in my library. I don't like the word seed bank for obvious reasons. In our seed library, the Almunia, we've had the Zuni red flint for about 30 years. And I try to grow it about every 5 years. And sometimes I even mix it up. And in 2015, for our seed library, Almunia, by the way, is an Arabic word. It means a grassroots agricultural extension research station and farm school. Arabic's a sophisticated language. It says a lot in one word. Yeah, and so since what we're doing was actually brought by people from North Africa and the Middle East to Spain, we thought we would honor that knowledge and its source by calling our farm the Almunia de las Dos Acequias. And as you can see here, the Hopi blue flower that we crossed that year. You can see, and look at this one. It's just like a little mosaic there. Beautiful. With Zuni red flint, you can see the red flint, and our local maíz de concho, which is the white flint that we prepare in adobe ovens every year. Except this year we got wiped out by raccoons, so we actually didn't make chicos this year. But that's okay. They have to eat too. Now, something very strange. Is this corn or what is that? Anyone know what that is? What is that?
Is that quinoa?
Huh? Quinoa? Looks like quinoa, doesn't it? Yeah. The local guys call that maíz de trenza. Braid corn. Like, braids. So, because it's corn, but instead of growing on a cob, it's growing in individual strands. I'm going to explain why in a moment, because it's a science story. When I asked one of my mentors, what is that? He said, se quiere hacer silvestre. Se quiere hacer silvestre. It wants to go wild again. That's what Adelmo Caver told me, because I showed it to him. This came out in 2010. It pops up in my field every now and then of our local white flint corn. And I couldn't figure out what it was. So I want to tell you a story about the connection between the science and justice through the voice of our corn sisters and brothers and ourselves as protectors of our brothers and sisters. And this is the corn that we grow to produce chicos al horno. Look at the morphology. It's really interesting to note I just turned it off. Sorry. This is what I wanted. You don't get all straight rows. You're going to have some that are spirals and some that are mottled. You have a lot of diversity just in the feeling and the shape of the corn. And that's when you can tell that you've got a landrace corn, an heirloom rather than a hybrid. It's one of the markers, one of the morphological markers. Sorry to use that word, but there it is. And it's got it actually, we call it maíz de concho. My theory is that this corn, I'll show you a map in a minute, came from the region of Sonora, the state of Sonora, Mexico. And that it was grown by Maya people who lived in the Sonoran watersheds and farmed this same corn. If you look at the collection of the CEMIT, the Mexican Center for Wheat and Corn Improvement, they have a library of photographs and descriptions. It's exactly like ours, the one that's growing in the Rio Concho watershed. And so I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's where the name Concho came from, because this is the same as Rio Concho Flint, morphologically speaking. We, according to Santisteban, the name for the Latin botanical classification for this is Aves cubanas. We call it Maíz de Concho culebreña, and we'll show you a picture in a minute. This is a very interesting plant because the corn that we grow this is a 64-day corn. And if you look at that, it's about 3.5 feet tall, and the cob is about half the biomass of the plant. So, if you look at other corns, including in a lot of Native American country, you get 5, 10, really high corn. And of course, all the GMO corns are real tall and skinny. That's why they pack them in like crazy. But in our corn, we have this very interesting thing going on where the plant has intelligence. It's really smart. Like my grandmother said, the seed is the memory of the plant of how to live well in this place. And this seed that we've been growing here for about 9 generations now in this particular place has learned a lot about how to live there. And so it's adapted to various conditions that we are interested in. Now, one of the things that interests me personally in the work that I do is how when we're considering a corn like Maíz de Concho and the stories that people tell about it, is there stories that Adelmo and many other people have told me about how it's very closely related to wild ancestors. And so you've got a native land race when there's a degree of wildness in it, when the plant species are also part of a population that's cultivated in a region where the wild ancestors are still around, like Tiosintle. Another criterion that you want to look for is that you have inbred populations. And that means you don't have any gene mixing with hybrid corn or GMO corn. And indeed, we had a study done by Ralph Bertrand of Colorado College, a corn biologist who's a colleague of mine and friend, and he found that it was highly inbred, no hybrid or GMO signatures at all in the genome profile and genome map that we did of this corn back in 1997, actually. So I'm hoping it's still clean.
Yes.
We're about to do a new genome map of our seed library. You're also looking, this is the most important thing I wanted to get to, is that this corn is adapted to the environment. And this happens over a long period of time. And when we look at all of our varieties, including this Hopizuni Lucenia Concho Chimera that we grew, and makes good Chicos del Horno actually, we found out, doing research, about someone named Vavilov, a Russian scientist who actually was dreaded and hated by the communists. And he identified the centers of origin, including that for corn, which is the Mesoamerican Vavilov Center. We, in our recent book, really disagree with that map in terms of the Corn Belt, and we see the Corn Belt stretching all up there into Onondaga country and so on in the northeast, and into portions of the Baja California where people are also growing corn as of 1450. This Mesoamerican Corn Belt includes our watershed, especially where we're looking at northern extensions of the center of origin and diversification of maize. And so I found this map in a study by Matsuoka and his colleagues, and these little kind of turquoise colored dots right there are Colorado, New Mexico. accession points for unique landrace varieties of maize. So this map basically says we are center of origin and diversification of maize in the San Luis Valley of Colorado. We're part of the accessions that occurred during this study. So how did we designate our Culebra Sequia farming watershed as center of origin, and why? We're trying to ban GMO corn from being grown in our county to protect the genetic integrity of our corn and to reduce the amount of herbicide that's sprayed in the county. We also added alfalfa, Roundup Ready alfalfa to the ban. So we were looking for a regression in mutations that show that there's still some wanting to be wild in that corn seed. It wants to go back to being wild. And so that's basically what that means. The corn wants to be wild again. It has traits that show you that it's protected from introgression, from contamination by other types of corn, like hybrid or GMO corns. There's a lot of diversity of shape, size, the width of the cob. You have 8-row corn and so on, which is not going to occur in hybrid corn. And so you look for things like that, like 8-row corn. And you have, like you saw in the picture, a very large racial cob size. And then adaptive traits that are related to the environment. In our case, we have a short season maturity, very short stalks of 3 to 4 feet, 64 to 74 day maturity, and the corn leaves dance. Literally dance, they form spirals, trying to minimize exposure to UV radiation, we theorize. While Midwestern and GMO corn sits there flat. Its leaves don't twirl, it forms spirals, they just stay there flat, lazy and flat. And little corn's lazy. So there you are. That's our corn. It's a Tunicate, and we figured out by reading George Beadle, who got the Nobel Prize for his work on the ancestry of corn, and look what he shows us in his diagram. Here it is. There's that good old Tunicate. It's a wild intermediate between Teosinte, native corn, and his oversized penis imagination about modern corn. He's compensating, obviously. I'm sorry, I have 1 minute. I'm going to probably take a little longer, but I'll try. So there you have it. That was the mystery. Our corn wants to be wild again. It ain't lazy. It's working hard to remain diverse. It's a smart plant. It's full of stories. And so this is what we harvested from the Corpus Gallegos 1988 that he gifted me. And none of this will happen in hybrid or GMO events. So you know you've got a real thing, a landrace, a native crop when it goes Tunicate on you as far as corn goes. And that happens with other crops too sometimes. So we grow and see some high altitude. Did you know for every 1,000-meter increase in altitude UV radiation, every 1,000 meters it increases by 10 to 2%. So plants have to adapt to that altitude. That's one reason they can't grow Nebraska Midwestern corn in the San Luis Valley. It gets burned up by the UV radiation. Diurnal extremes, you know, you have an overnight low of 30-something and a daytime high of 80. That's a 50-degree change within 24 hours. Not all plants can handle that. Our plants are smart. They adapt to the environment. Now, the other thing we're worried about, I'm going to skip over this because I want to just show you the photographs of the people and of the stories that tie corn and culture, people, and place together. Because that's what the Acequia Institute focuses on. But one of the things you'll notice about this region is all the center pivots are GMOs. Really, they all are, except for a handful of them. They're all GMO corn, mainly GMO alfalfa, GMO soy, GMO canola, and now they're doing GMO potatoes in the Blanca area. And these are all industrial farms. And the Acequia farms are in these little bottomlands of the river canyons. You can see them here. That's where the Acequias are. Our landrace crops, 23,000 irrigated acres with the 32 oldest priority rights in the state. Although we like to say one of the accomplishments of the Acequia Institute, I should say, was the 2009 Colorado Acequia Recognition Law that established this basic fact. We're prior to prior, like by 30 years or so. So our law has just been authorized to be how we govern ourselves. And a very important difference that some of you may have heard me talk about is one irrigator, one vote, rather than share-based voting. What does that do? It creates a water democracy. The big guys cannot dominate the small guys. Everybody gets to vote for one vote. Now, Let me finish with a series of photographs that will tell a story that I think are beautiful. These are our adobe ovens. We're getting ready to make chicos. This was at the Joe Gallegos Ranch. We see this as a heritage cuisine, what we like to call first foods or deep foods, rather than just local and slow. They're true to place, they're deep to place. This is 3 generations that work the annual horneada at the Gallegos Ranches every year, including this year. This is our Almunia horno, and my late dear friend, former County Commissioner Joe Gallego, checking out the heat of the fire to decide when we're going to stick the corn in. Me wearing my Che Guevara hat. There's Alberto Mesta, some of you know him, and his partner, Donna. No, let's not look at that. But there I am, finishing loading up, and then we're sealing the horno. Some people put a wooden board, some people put metal board. I prefer to do adobe bricks. At the end, Alberto Mesta is a sculptor sculpting the back of the vent hole to seal the horno. Very important tradition. I should point out, when you're doing hornos, when you're cooking corn that way with ash, you nixtamalize it. So nixtamalization is done just the way you would do with pozole. That's a very important thing. Here we have Father Pat during the feast day of San Isidro Labrador. So the growing of corn, the blessing of the fields with holy water, all of these are important features of the community's spirituality. And I really don't have time to talk about that. Let me show you a few more photographs without really saying anything. That's obviously the second. That's our headwaters. That's the long lots. Typical milpa, polyculture milpa. They're all over the place, although not as many as there used to be. Corpus Gallegos, one of my mentors, and Adelmo Caber, one of my other mentors. Karen Mendoza, our youth, one of the things we try to train them is to participate in the annual spring ditch cleanup, which is a communal activity. And we have a big communal meal with our own food. Joe Gallegos examining the corn they harvested when my father died. I wasn't around. That's part of my Chimera collection, also some beets from my farm. Our annual gathering for the cleanup of the ditch. And some of my friends, if they would stand up, they're here from this particular event. And I want to close with this slide because this really is about science, community, culture, and politics. Look at 2 signs, and I think they really touch on several things. If you look at this one here, Taylor destroys families, farms, and forests. This is what Robin was talking about. We're all persons. Forests are persons, farms are persons, families are persons. They should all have personhood. And I really feel like this particular campaign that brought Earth First and Greenpeace and Ancient Forest Record together with Chicano family farmers and land grant activists was an amazing example of indigenous survivance, of survival and resistance. And another very important sign held by local young women is Sin agua no hay vida. Without water, there's no life. And this, I think, we would all agree, as we saw at Standing Rock, is a very fundamental philosophical, ethical statement about how we feel in terms of our relationship of knowledge to practice with respect to our home, our Mother Earth. So, thank you very much.